of news for subway-weary travelers. Major cities across the world are finding that public transportation may not be as risky as thought. With us now, transit reporter for the New York Times, Christina Goldbaum. She has a new piece entitled, "Is the Subway Risky? It May Be Safer Than You Think." Christina, thank you so much for being with us. Mike Barnicle, we're trying to get her picture back. But I read this article yesterday and was really surprised, because obviously back in March, we were sure that one of the reasons why New York's coronavirus numbers exploded so badly had to do with subways. But this report yesterday in the Times suggests it may not be the super spreader that we once thought.
Yeah, well, it certainly isn't now, Joe, given the scarcity of riders on the subway. But the subways have taken a quick turnaround during the course of what we've been going through with the pandemic, in that they've been cleaned up. There's been a lot of attention paid to them. And I would be unafraid to ride a subway if I saw that most of the other passengers, if not all of the other passengers, were wearing a mask. Again, we get back to the mask, Joe. That's the key. And I think it's the key in the subway, it's on the sidewalk and in office buildings, and it's a simple thing. I mean, we talk about it endlessly, but it's the mask.
Yeah. Okay. Fantastic. Let's bring Christina in now. Christina, I think we have your picture. So when I read the article yesterday, I was surprised because, again, you've heard the stories as a Times transit reporter that the subway is what carried the virus around all over New York City and why it exploded so quickly there instead of other places. But that's not what you found when you started reporting the story. Tell us about it.
Yeah, so we looked at cities around the world, and if they were able to trace back any new outbreaks of coronavirus to public transit. And what we found is that in no other cities where ridership has rebounded even more than in New York, so far there haven't been any new outbreaks connected to mass transit. And that's in part because the subway car is a little bit different than, let's say, a restaurant or a bar. People are wearing masks. They're not talking that much, so they're not producing as many aerosols. People tend to spend less time on mass transit than they would if they're going out to see friends at a restaurant. And also the ventilation system is surprisingly effective in New York. The air exchange rate on a subway 18 times an hour. So that means that the recycled air inside a car is replaced with fresh air about every 3 minutes. And so what this means is that it perhaps right now is not as risky as people assumed it was many months ago. There are some caveats, and that is to say that back in March and in April, when people were not wearing masks, it was probably much riskier than it is today. But right now, if you're riding the subway today, as you said, many people, almost everyone is wearing masks right now. And the crowding is very much reduced because they only have 20% of their usual ridership.
Yeah, Jonathan Lemire, who knew that air inside New York City subways was as clean as it was, that it was as filtered as it was?
Joe, as a veteran of the New York City subway system, that does come as a surprise because I've been on plenty of subway cars where that air did not feel particularly fresh. Christina, let me ask you, though, staying on New York, obviously it's some of that cleaning process which has taken a lot of these cars out of service, and in New York for a time is not offering the 24/7 subway service that it has been its hallmark for decades. But I'm more curious as to simply what can you tell us about ridership levels right now? I know they plummeted in the early stages of the pandemic. You certainly do see photos online of some subway cars are crowded. But what is the ridership levels now, and what is the city and state, and of course, remember the state, as you know, controls the subway system. What are they doing to encourage riders to ride, but to do so safely? How are they getting people to go back on these trains?
So, back in April and March, ridership plummeted around 90%. In the last couple of weeks, it's plateaued at around 20% of its usual 5.5 million riders. And it's been that way for about the past month. So, part of, I think, the disinfection that the subway is doing, that the MTA is doing, part of that is because it is important for public health. But part of that is that the MTA's job right now is to try to convince riders that it is safe to ride the subway. And they have two goals, essentially. They need to lure more riders back because their fares make up around 40% of the MTA's operating budget. But at the same time, they need to do so, and not until crowding gets so bad that the risk calculation changes. So you do need to lure more riders back. But if crowding, gets back to that sardine can, subway that we are used to, that means that the subway will be much riskier in terms of transmission.
All right. Transit reporter for the New York Times, Christina Goldbaum, thank you so much for being here. Absolutely fascinating. We appreciate it. And we appreciate you watching this morning. That does it for us today. Stephanie Ruhle picks up the coverage after this break. Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.